As we begin to bring this series on end times into land, I want us to finish off by looking at three of the bad guys from the tribulation, three characters that we see described, particularly through the second half of the tribulation. One of the things that often puts people off of reading Revelation is because it talks about dragons and beasts, and it's very difficult for us to sort of understand what's being meant. And we have to understand that when we read prophecy, a bit like sometimes in church, we get pictures, that the Holy Spirit would give us a picture of something. Sometimes pictures are used to represent something else. And that's what we have here in Revelation. And what we have are three characters. We have a dragon, we have a beast from the sea, and a beast from the earth. And what we're going to do is just to understand a little bit of what these three represent and some of the things that are implied through their presence. The first character we see is this red dragon that appears in Revelation chapter 12. And this red dragon is described as having 7 heads and 10 horns with 7 crowns. And as we read on in Revelation 12, we see very clearly when we get to verse 9 that this dragon is clearly identified as the devil, as Satan. So when we read anything that relates to the dragon, then we can be fairly sure that this is being used to represent Satan. The second character we have is the beast from the sea. And in Revelation 13 verse 1, we see that the dragon raises up a beast from the sea. And this beast from the sea looks a lot like the dragon. He has 7 heads, 10 horns, but unlike the dragon, he's got 10 crowns. So in other words, he's identifying with the devil. He's identifying very much as being like the devil. There's this sense of similarity. And this beast from the sea has a very clear purpose. If we get confused by all these heads, horns and crowns, we have to again understand that they represent something. Heads speak of leadership. Horns speak of strength or kingdoms, and crowns speak of rule and authority. So when we come to the beast of the sea, who's got 10 heads and 10 crowns, many people will link that to a 10 kingdom system. And look back to Daniel chapter 7, where in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel prophesies that in the end times, one king will rise up who will defy God, oppress the people of God, and change the way that the people of God worship him. They will change the systems of worship. And these characteristics are very much what we see when we look at the beast from the sea. What we also see with the beast from the sea is that not only is he identifying with Satan, he is given the power and the authority by Satan. It says that Satan gives him his power and his authority. And if we've got any questions about that, remember back to Luke chapter 4, where Jesus is in the wilderness at the beginning of his ministry, and he's being tempted by Satan. And Satan offers him the kingdoms of this world if he will just worship him. And Jesus rejects that. Clearly what we see here with the beast from the sea is that offer that's been made is something that he accepts. He clearly identifies with Satan. He takes on Satan's power and Satan's authority. And what's more, one of these heads is described as having a fatal wound from what's been recovered. In other words, there's a sense of this beast being resurrected. In other words, a sense of a counterfeit Christ. These characteristics, these symbols that we read, they point very much to this beast having this sort of pseudo-religious Messiah-like quality. And certainly when we read on through chapters 13 and onwards, we see that the beast requires people to worship him. He's given authority for 42 months. We read that in verse 5 of chapter 13. So when Satan gives him the power and authority, it's for 42 months, which is exactly half of a tribulation. And in my mind, that's why I seem to fit this in my mind as the beast rising up at the midpoint. So when the treaty that's been made, this peace treaty that begins the tribulation, is broken halfway through, it's broken when we see the beast from the sea rising up.